Chapter 144. Susan wasn't sure what kept her feet moving, but she was thankful for it. She was in such excruciating pain over her loss. She barely remembered what mental command lifted her legs or bent her knees. Jeremy walked in front of her, holding her hand as he led her through the hallways. His skin was so soft, so warm, and felt charged with electricity. She felt the power pulsating beneath his flesh. It rushed through his body with each heartbeat. Every fiber of her being wanted to yank him back, spin him around, and demand he'd tell her what was happening. Instead, like she was on autopilot, she followed him down the hallway. Jeremy looked back at her and nodded, hearing everything. He knew her hunger for answers, but he also knew she couldn't handle them right now. She couldn't stand the strain of so many conflicting emotions. No human being could. There was the answer why he and Craig were still sane. His mind was no longer human. The power changed him. It forced his mind to adapt and was dragging Craig along with him. "Wait," Jeremy whispered, touching the door handle to ICU. It was locked. "Now what?" Susan asked, trying the handle. "This," Jeremy replied. His eyes flashed. There was a muffled click. The door swung open. "Neat trick," Susan mumbled. "Remind me to call you the next time I lock my keys in the Jeep." Jeremy nodded. "It's a deal." He went inside. Susan followed him. Every room on this floor had glass walls. Machines clicked and beeped, breaking the grim silence at irregular intervals. A team of nurses and a staff physician sat at the station at the end of the hall, closely watching the monitors. Jeremy planted a suggestion in their minds that they couldn't see him or Susan. It was a trick he gleaned from the Hill Witch. He didn't dare put them to sleep, reading their concern over some of the vitals they observed. Mike Dougan's vitals, for example, were stable but dangerously low. They passed his room. Susan pointed at Sandra, who decided not to leave her husband's side. She had her head on Mike's stomach, with her eyes closed as she drifted in and out of sleep. They snuck past, saying nothing. Jeremy promised he would take care of Mike and everyone else the moment he saved his mother. He read something in the doctor's mind about Virginia's vital signs being erratic. Her brainwave patterns were insanely wrong, too, as if several other patterns were overlapping hers. He was sure she wouldn't make it through the night. He was already formulating a strategy to set her up on life support if her vitals failed. Susan and Jeremy slipped into Virginia's room, determined to make sure that didn't happen. They entered. Jeremy froze. "Oh my God," Susan gasped, her hand over her mouth. "What happened to her?" Virginia sat on an incline. Only a spot or two of her whole body didn't have a bandage. Her leg was suspended in the air in a large white cast. Her toes stuck out of the end. They were bruised black and blue. So was her face. Her features were barely visible through the swelling. Her heart monitor flashed erratically. The numbers counting the beats changed continuously, going higher, lower, higher, lower. Jeremy felt her pain without even trying. "I happened to her," Jeremy gulped, taking his hand from Susan and drifting to his mother. A single tear fell. His eyes narrowed. He said, "It wasn't my fault." "Can you help her?" Susan whispered. What an insane question. Jeremy let his hand drift across her cheek before laying it on her shoulder. His eyes exploded with brilliance as he channeled his power into her body. Susan took a step back in amazement. "Just watch." "Huh?" Virginia's body rejected his healing power. He tried again, his heartbeat quickening. Once more, the energy flowed over her and got sent back. Her body refused to allow him entry. Puzzled, he scanned her. Susan leaned over. confused by the expression of desperation on his face. Jeremy reached out and grabbed Susan's hand. He forced his mother's feelings into Susan, mentally begging her to tell him what they meant. Susan sighed as she remembered the joy of the sensations flooding her. "We might have a problem here," Susan whispered.